Welcome to the series finale of Haunted Histories. I'm your host, Bobby Morrison, and on this show, I will talk about a haunted location in the Durham region, the histories of the property, surrounding area owners, and the alleged hauntings. In this episode, things will go a bit differently. I will finally be taking a look at the Parkwood Estate in Oshawa, Ontario, but was told no one was able to speak with me, so I will not be hearing from anyone this episode. Instead, I will be retelling the ghostly stories and all the histories and whatnot, as well as showing pictures and sort of animating them using my software to make them look more interesting. Now, to begin, I will talk about Parkwood Estate and its ghostly hauntings. I will also add in my thoughts on these hauntings, as though I'm a believer, I don't necessarily believe in everything. This image that you can see here is apparently alleged ghosts at the estate, which is really cool, because nice evidence like this is rare, but at the same time, I don't know where this was taken, because the estate house itself is white, and that's a brick background, so I don't know where it was taken. They said on the article I got from from Parkwood Estate, so I assume that, but they may have been incorrect. So the article that I'm using is from the Paranormal Seekers, who talked about some of their ghostly experiences in the house, and it starts off with, quote, "On March 5th, 2005, the Paranormal Seekers were offered an all-inclusive, private, after-hours tour of the estate," end quote. The Seekers go on to say, as one of their team members passed the in-home bowling alley, yes, they had an in-home bowling alley, they found it hard to breathe. Apparently, this part of the estate is the most active. There was apparently static on the video cameras in the area, which, quote, "is related to the presence of paranormal activity," end quote. Personally, I don't know about that. The only thing I know about static or graininess in film is for radiation levels or camera faults, as when I googled static/fuzziness in film, an article by Sony says that, quote, "to make sure the lens is clean because it could be caused by dirt particles," end quote. I haven't really heard of static in film being attributed to the paranormal, but then again, the Seekers have their own way of doing stuff, and as they told us last week, really all paranormal events are dramatized in the media to make them more interesting, as a lot of paranormal events, nothing really happens. Some of the alleged hauntings of Parkwood Estate include an alleged poltergeist in the estate's library. For those who don't know, poltergeists are typically non-spirits and more just a sort of energy that has the power to move things, but this information changes from article to article since no one really knows, and that I just told you came from The Dead Files, which is a show on Detour. Not as intense as the horror film Poltergeist or its 2015 reboot of the same name, according to Wikipedia, as more sources try to Hollywood what an actual poltergeist is, it is, quote, "in ghost lore, a poltergeist, German for rumbling ghost or noisy spirit," side note, I have heard this said before, so it might be true, is a type of ghost or spirit that was responsible for physical disturbances such as loud noises and objects being moved or destroyed, end quote. This type of paranormal presence has probably been the oldest type to be shown on YouTube, especially a famous video now gone suspiciously that pops up on compilation channels for ghosts like Slapped Hammer Nukes Top 5, which is a guy's kitchen being absolutely decimated by an unseen force, cabinets opening and closing, drawers flying open, utensils flying from left to right, chairs moving, just absolute madness. And fake. Or at least that's what the internet feels. See, as Rachel explained last week, most ghosts aren't that intense, and I agree. If a man's kitchen was destroyed via ghost, I feel like it would have gone viral, and you would have heard it from everyone, like, yo, did you see that guy's kitchen be destroyed via ghosts? So, yeah. Back to the poltergeist in the library. One of the team members named Brenda, the same lady who found it hard to breathe earlier, felt the presence of several other unhappy ghosts in the area who wanted them to leave. Later, the team saw orbs in the video and captured EVPs or disembodied voices around them in that room. Spirit orbs can appear in photos and videos and generally can be spotted as different from dust or bugs, as dust just drips along in sunlight and bugs show up as black masses in sunlight, while in night vision they are white but they have obvious wings, so you can see them flying around. Also, for those who don't know, disembodied voices are basically like EVPs or electronic voice phenomenons. you'll pick them up on your recorders so you can ask a question, and then you might hear like a whisper voice say, "I'm here," or something like that. Like, that's what an EVP is. Disembodied voices are more just, you hear it like in your ears, like you hear a person's voice, but that person's dead. That's that sort of thing. Some of the other presences that have been reported by the seekers and others is seeing figures in the windows, like the picture from before, the feeling of being watched or followed, uneasy feelings in many of the rooms, battery drainage, which can be caused by spirits taking energy apparently, as well as a plethora of human spirits, including that of Samuel and his wife Adelaide, as well as other members of the McLaughlin family and Samuel and Adelaide's children. It would also make sense, though, that the family could be hanging around the estate, as it was where many happy memories took place. Now we'll talk about the property history and land. To begin with the estate, I will talk about the man who lived there, Samuel McLaughlin, and his history is very interesting. According to the Parkwood Estate site, Samuel was born in Enniskillen, Ontario. According to Google Maps, though, Enniskillen is technically in Clarington, Ontario now, and is a 23-kilometer drive from Oshawa, Ontario, Oshawa Center area. Also from the estate site, Sam apparently did not want to enter the family business, which was carriage making, at first, wanting to be in legal careers. But after being an apprentice in his dad's carriage works, he stayed on to change the company from carriage works to automobiles with the help of his brother, making Oshawa known for the great things as automobiles. The McLaughlin car was in big demand, that's the car that they made, in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. The McLaughlin car, though, wasn't completely original, as the motors were made by Buick. After a partnership between the two companies to put Buick motors in McLaughlin cars, the two companies would later semi-merge to make a Chevrolet Canada company, and then finally the companies would fully merge into General Motors Canada. Later on, Samuel McLaughlin was able to become and stay president of the Canadian GM operation from the early 1900s until 1945, when he stepped down and then became chairman of the board. He held this position for 27 years until his death in 1972. He was 101, or close to it, by the time of his death, as the site does not say his age when he died. Though it's still impressive, especially for someone born in the late 1800s, to live to 101. The site also shows McLaughlin's private side, which is that he was also at one time the director of the Art Gallery of Ontario, the director of the Canadian General Electric Company, along with Canadian Pacific Railway, or Railroad, Cited Mining and Smelting Company of Canada. He was the director of Famous Player Theatres Ltd. Personally, this is my favorite theater ever, and only one, as I'm aware, still exists. It's technically a Cineplex now in the Scarborough Town Center, but still retains the Famous Players title, and the reason I like it so much is because there's like Mighty Mouse and other like old movie characters hanging from the ceiling. He also worked for the International Nickel Company of Canada, Loews Canada Theatres Ltd, but Loews spelled Loews, McIntyre Corporation of Canada, Royal Trust, and the Toronto Dominion Bank, or TD for short. Sam was also part of the Ontario Regiment, proudly, says the site, as he was named an honorary lieutenant colonel of the 11th Ontario Regiment in 1921, an honorary colonel in 1936, and an honorary colonel for life in 1967. Sam also donated many gifts, bursaries, and scholarships to, quote, educational institutions, and made many contributions to institutions in healthcare, recreation, literature, arts and culture, and science, end quote. As well, in 1952, he created the R. Samuel McLaughlin Foundation, which was used for charitable purposes until 2002, when the foundation was completed. Samuel was also, quote, awarded the Order of Canada in 1976, as well as an honorary doctorates from the universities of Acadia, McGill, McMaster, York, Queens, Saskatchewan, Toronto, and the University of Guelph, end quote. Mr. McLaughlin was also a fan of many sports, including horse racing, which lasted him 30 years. This also led to the creation of Parkwood Stables, now known as Winfield Farm, which, according to Google Maps, is located in Oshawa, Ontario by the Winchester Golf Course. Another notable person who lived at the estate was Sam's wife, Adelaide McLaughlin. From the Parkwood Estate site, quote, Adelaide Louise Mowbray was born on February 9th, 1875 in Kinsale, Ontario, end quote, which is now part of Pickering, Ontario, and is 21.1 kilometers away from the Oshawa Center area. Adelaide was born on a farm, and her father was a man named Ralph Mowbray, and her mother was Victoria Nutting. They were both of Scottish ancestral descent and came from the United Empire Loyalist stock, which means they were the Loyalists from America, where they were loyal to the British Empire. Apparently, her mother could trace her lineage back to the Mayflower, that famed ship that brought the first British colonists to Plymouth, Massachusetts, end quote. Adelaide attended Ottawa Normal School, a teacher's college, and was a teacher in Whitby, Ontario, though I am not sure to which level, elementary or secondary school. How Sam and Adelaide met was, quote, visiting his uncle's farm in Brougham, Ontario, and spotted Adelaide while attending church, end quote. Samuel later said, quote, the only person I really saw in the church that day was a vision of beauty in the choir, end quote. It was only 2 dates the couple had before Sam proposed to her, and they married in February of 1898. The wedding happened at Adelaide's family farm with a honeymoon to New York, and they would stay married for 58 years until Adelaide's death in 1958. She was 81. A year after marriage, they had their first child. She was named Aline, born 1899. Then came Mildred, born at the turn of the century in 1900, Isabel in 1903, and Hilda in 1905, and finally Eleanor in 1908. All of the McLaughlin daughters were just like their parents, making contributions to the community and receiving many awards like Isabel, whose contributions led her to being awarded the Order of Canada in 1997 and the Order of Ontario in 1993. Adelaide did not like to just stay at home, so she began to donate to charities in the area, including a charity to build the Oshawa General Hospital. Her fundraising made it so the hospital was opened in 1910. Adelaide was also a lover of flowers to the point where she had a gala every year at the estate called the Chrysanthemum Tea, where hundreds of guests would attend. Adelaide oversaw all activities at her home and took extra care of the gardens and greenhouses. There is also a public school in Oshawa, Ontario, named Adelaide McLaughlin Public School, most likely named after her. The estate still keeps up with the gardens too. Just like the Lindhouse Museum, the Parkwood Estate has 11 greenhouses. Now, for the estate itself, it is a massive 2-story home directly beside the Oshawa General Hospital or Lakeridge Health. To describe it, you know when you pass the hospital and you see that sort of mansion-like entrance and wonder, what's that? That is Parkwood Estate. The house has a green roof and green window shutters, while the house itself is white. As you can see, this image from Google Maps shows the satellite view of the area, and it's massive. The lands of the estate also come with a big fountain, pictured here, and the many gardens, greenhouses, and grassy areas. As the site shows, quote, by early 1815, the McLaughlins had achieved first family status in Oshawa and purchased the former Prospect Park to be the site of their new home, end quote. I'm not too sure what first family means, but I'm going to assume it has something to do with their wealth. The mansion took 2 years to be built and was inspired by 20th century Buick's arts design. According to architecture.org, quote, influenced by classical, Roman, and Greek dominant style of architecture in the United States between the late 19th century and early 20th century, end quote. And you can tell what they look like from the pictures here. According to the site, the mansion's design is rare, and quote, the architect team, Darling and Pearson, are highly regarded for their influence on Canadian institutional architecture, end quote. And also, quote, Parkwood was designed for entertaining, with unusual recreational features, amenities, and novelties to be enjoyed by the McLaughlins and their many guests, end quote. Some of these amenities being a grand conservatory, which is what you are seeing now, which looks like a massive outdoor/indoor gazebo, though this image is not from the estate, as well as a squash court, again not from the estate, this bowling alley, which the picture is from the estate, a Elian organ, which looks like this and is apparently very rare, This image is also not of their exact organ because I couldn't find it, as well as a games room and an indoor swimming pool which is heated. This mansion was truly for the rich. What blows me away though is all the amenities, as the only bowling alley I've heard of in a house was at the White House. For the land history, it is the same as last time. The earliest known settlement in Oshawa was in the 1400s when the Wendat settled near the area of Harmony Creek. It wasn't until the 1700s when the area of Oshawa was settled by colonizers, and in 1793 the governor at the time, Governor Simcoe, planned the road, which is now Highway 2, to entice settlers to move further inland. It wasn't until 1849 that Oshawa was incorporated into a village, and it wasn't until 1876 that the McLaughlin family arrived in Oshawa to begin their carriage works company for the British Empire. In 1924, the city of Oshawa was finally seen as a city and given the status. This was achieved after the population of the city went over 15,000 people. Throughout this time, and through the late 1900s, the city's population and employment kept growing. Now the city of Oshawa has over 172,000 people and is, quote, the largest municipality in Durham region. It is home to 3 post-secondary institutions and is rich in arts and cultural assets, with over 500 cultural businesses, events, and festivals, end quote from the City of Oshawa website. Some of those post-secondary schools include Trek University and Durham College North Campus. Oshawa is also home to the massive Oshawa Center Mall, as seen here, as well as 2 Walmart supercenters and many public parks like the Rotary Park. Since the lands have been around for so long and the McLaughlin family had a large influence on the city and the economy, all these things could influence the hauntings at Parkwood. Now I will get into my final thoughts. For the estate, I think it's possible that it is haunted. There is a lot of evidence of spirit orbs that figure in the window I mentioned before, and the EVPs caught in the house could make it possible that it's haunted. The static evidence the secret had doesn't really sway me, but that's just me. The feelings of being followed/watched could be just because it's an old home. As I've mentioned before, I've felt the same way at being in old buildings, though that doesn't exactly make them haunted. I think that it is very possible the estate is haunted though. But what do you think, listener? Is the estate haunted, or is it all just superstition? You can visit the estate at 270 Simcoe Street North, Oshawa, Ontario, right by the Oshawa General Hospital. And that has been Haunted Histories. Thanks for joining me and listening to these interesting histories and great hauntings. I've been your host, Bobby Morrison. You can follow me on Twitter at JediBo_29 for updates on Nerdly Talks, the other podcasts on this channel, and nerdly@riotradio.ca. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day. As per usual, the works cited can be found in the description.